Welcome to the CMO Spotlight, and I'm here today with David Partain, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for Flexshares Exchange Traded Funds, which is part of Northern Trust. Welcome, David.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Great to have you here. So I wondered if you could begin by just telling us a little bit more about Flexshares and how that fits in to Northern Trust.
Sure. Northern Trust is a large, really international institution, $1 trillion in assets under management. And it started off as a large bank about 130 years ago. And it has grown now into a very large money manager and kept its roots as a bank. But Flexshares is a sub-brand within the broader Northern Trust. And it started about 11 years ago. And the beauty of it is when you start with a kind of an entrepreneurial feel of Flexshares is within a older organization, because as you can imagine, especially in an older bank, there's a lot of processes and risk evaluation. But when they started Flexshares, they kind of gave it, we're kind of on a floor off by ourselves, and we were able to kind of germinate and do the things that need to be done from an innovation standpoint that are tougher to do in a 130-year-old bank sometimes.
Sure. And so for those that don't know, explain kind of what a traded fund is. How does that fit into the bank portfolio?
Yeah, so most of your listeners would be aware of, say, a mutual fund. It is basically a mutual fund that trades on an exchange like the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. So it basically allows an investor to trade out or into a particular exchange traded fund with very minimal interaction, say with an advisor, or easier. It's more tax efficient. It just makes the process of investing so much easier on the individual investor. And as a advisor who we principally market to, they can then take and make a model for a particular investor that really fits with where they need to go in an easy to exchange method. So if someone said, I want to be in high yield today, but 6 months from now they want to be out, instead of having to own, say, 50 high yield bonds, you could do that all within one investment and get in and out as you feel, or your advisor feels like the market is moving for you.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about your role as CMO, and maybe talk about the team and talk about what your focus is there.
Sure. Well, I have global in my title because we just started about 2 years ago in Europe, producing ETFs and marketing ETFs in Europe. And so we've gained employees in our London office. And so that made me go global. But up to that point, really, the United States is the dominant player in exchange traded funds. It has grown, especially in Europe and even some in Asia. So that would be the next point that we would move to. But our team really is made up of individuals who manage a lot of really vendor partnerships. We're a smaller team, but we've attempted to be as nimble as possible, and we can do that when we manage vendors who really will do something much quicker than we can get done even internally. So we've taken a group of individuals who are creative in their own right, but then turn them also into managers of vendors that can help us be nimble and agile if the need arises. And with a group like we have, we are always needing to be agile, especially given what happened in 2020. So
yeah. So I know that from a career standpoint, you actually, I think you went undergrad to Liberty, and then you went to Wharton. Wheaton undergrad, and then Liberty. You got your MBA at Liberty.
Yes.
And I'm just curious if you could give us a little bit of your career path that led you. I know you've been at Northern Trust total of, I think, 12 years almost. So.
Yeah, 12 years, and I'm slightly older than 34 at this point, if you can't tell by my gray hair. I have tried to start I've been an entrepreneur myself. I've attempted three startups, one with on my own with venture capital, another one with my brother, and another one with my best friend. And what I've told people is, what is the defining, who's the person in that where it really didn't make it? So I'm working for Northern Trust. I'm not a client of Northern Trust. So that kind of tells you how well it went. Not that it went that badly, but who is the in all three scenarios, who's the bad one? And I have to point at myself. I feel like I'm a really good marketer, but there are pieces of my career that I've had to really learn. And unfortunately, I've had to learn them as an entrepreneur. And there were pieces that just, for me, like I'm not a coder. I know what technology can do, but I'm not a coder. And my first venture, I needed to have been a coder. And frankly, I wasn't, and it failed. But in all those failures, I have learned so much along the way. And I have been in a multitude of, I've worked in television, I've worked in consulting, I've worked in financial services, I've worked in oil and gas. I've had a great career. One of my qualities for me is I always love to learn. I'm constant. And so to go from various opportunities, even in different sectors of the economy, has been just wonderful for me personally in my growth.
I love it. So I'm curious if there's a piece of advice that you wish that you had gotten very early in your career, or maybe the advice you'd give to a young marketer that's just starting out.
Yeah, and I've said this at marketing conferences where I've spoken. One of the best things I did was about the middle of my career. After I'd been in marketing for a time, is I actually went into sales and took sales training.
Yeah.
And actually learned the sales process. And what that taught me was how to take the sales process and overlay the marketing process over it, and then overlay the buying process over it, because those are three processes that are all happening at the same time. And if you can identify and line up with where they are, it will really help you as a marketer. It's made me a much better marketer, but it took a couple of years. I was fairly successful as a salesperson, but sales is a hard work.
Yeah.
And it's not there is creativity there, but it's a different creative. And I realized, hey, you know what? I really like the marketing creative side as opposed to the personal, because in sales, you have to be really personally creative about, okay, they said this, I need to say this.
Yes.
And that, it was fine. It taught me how to be the best marketer I could be. So I've said to young marketers, go into sales for a time, either whether it's stay in your current role as a marketer and make sure you get in the field with the sales team. But there's nothing like actually trying sales, because it'll make you a much better marketer.
I think that's great advice. And often sales and marketing can be at odds. And so
big time.
I think two of the most important attributes of a quality marketer are curiosity and empathy. Mm-hmm. And, I think that fulfills both curiosity and empathy because hopefully the marketing team then has empathy for how difficult it is and what sales goes through. And then also is, curious about how they do what they do and do it well. I think that's a powerful combination.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is, when you're in marketing, and especially in the financial services business, salespeople tend to make pretty good money. And you look at them as a marketer and you go, come on, they don't deserve that. And I'll tell you what, they do.
They do.
They do. And I have had the opportunity to learn why, because hearing no all the time is hard. It's hard emotionally. That was really what drove me out of sales, is like hearing no constantly and then hearing that yes, which was valuable, but it's really tough to get to that yes. And so I respect them greatly. Whenever I speak to our sales team, our distribution team, they all know I've been in their shoes, and they all respect what I have to say. So
that's great. So I believe that everybody has a superpower, and I'm curious what your superpower might be.
Well, unfortunately, it actually happened recently. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, and it's I'm going to say it is extreme concentration, and I'll tell you how it happened. I was they have pushed down into the various business units the website management of our websites, and which is great from a standpoint that now we control, we can push pages out, but now we're creating pages. And so there was a particular problem on our website that I was trying to figure out. I was determined. I'm not a programmer, like I mentioned, or a coder, but I was determined to figure this out. And there was a exec team meeting with my boss at 4 o'clock. I started working on this at 3 o'clock. The next thing that happened, I looked up, it was 5 to 4. It was 5 to 5. And I had blown off my boss's exec team meeting. I immediately called him and said, I am so sorry to miss your meeting, but I was so engrossed in what I was doing. And I find that I can get in what's called deep work. One of the best books I ever read was on what's called deep work. And I can really do, especially now that I get to work remote 2 days a week on Monday and Friday. So it was a Friday, and I was just engrossed. And so I would have to say that extreme concentration has been a real gift for me on occasion, because I did figure it out. I figured it out, but it cost me an exec team meeting.
Well, that truly is a superpower, because I have none of that. I have the opposite. I can maybe concentrate on 10 things at once, which is not so good when you need deep work. So I'm curious if there's specific values that you want to demonstrate to your team, or maybe even values that you would demand on somebody that works on your team.
Yeah, good. That's a great question. The one I try most is integrity, because integrity is when no one's looking, how do you act? And my team knows that when I say something to them, that it's the truth. And because if you don't, they will not really respect you, and they can't trust you. And trust is the biggest obstacle to change, is lack of trust. If someone trusts you, they will accept almost any amount of change if they think you're doing it out of the goodness, either for them or them and the organization. But at the end of the day, they want to know that you're looking out for them. So do I. I mean, I want to know my boss, that I can trust my boss. And the other one is steadfastness. I try my best to not get too upset or too down, or even too happy, because happiness, actually, I'm going to say I try not to get too down, because business is up down. Stock market is all low, especially in this business. Stock market is everywhere. And so being able to hold and be steadfast during times like that really pays dividends too with your team. And the last is, I try to have empathy. As you mentioned it before, I think it is one of the ways that you can also build trust with your team. And if you have trust with your team, they'll walk through a brick wall for you. If they trust you. And sometimes, and I don't like to make them do that all the time, but there are some times when we got to get this done. We got to do it this way, and you just have to trust me. And if they're trusting you before, then they will trust you then.
I love that. So here at Setup, we essentially help marketers thrive by bringing them together with the best people and resources. And that often means we connect brands and marketing agencies together. And so we're not an agency. We're not on the client side. We live in that space in between. And so I'm just curious, either at Northern Trust or in a previous life, generally, how do you work with marketing agencies? Do you work with marketing agencies, and what does that look like?
Yeah, we actually, as I mentioned, our people are basically managers of agencies, whether it's a digital marketing agency, whether it's even a simple graphic designer. Our best graphic designer is a guy who lives in North Carolina, he has just been Johnny on the spot, the old saying, like when we need something, he produces it very quickly, and he's good. So it's really managing those agencies, and as it's oftentimes it's easier in corporate America now to almost fire an agency over firing someone on your team. And it's not only easy, it's easier emotionally as well as process wise.
Yeah.
But I've been loath to do either, to be frank with you, because I try to hire both at the front end. Well, you are going to end up doing that on occasion, but I really hire people and agencies for their expertise. And so, like, I manage my people very hands off. We basically have a meeting once a week. We have a team meeting once a week, and then we have an accomplishment review once a month to talk about everything they accomplished and to celebrate everything they accomplished. And it's the same thing with our agencies. We're not on them all the time, because frankly, if I hired them and have to be on them, I've actually hired the wrong agency.
Right.
I hired them for their expertise. And so I'm going to let them go and be creative and do what I hired them to do.
Well, you brought up a point that we talk about a lot here, which is agencies can allow you to scale up quickly and also fill gaps in both capacity and capability, right? So, and it's easier to hire an agency with multiple disciplines of expertise than it is to hire 5 different headcount. And then if things do get tough, it's easier to trim back the agency than it is to lay off those 5 people you just hired.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's and I hate to do either one, because oftentimes you build up real trust with an agency too. And it happens. But it's I like the fact that agencies can hire, especially nowadays, they can hire people with expertise that really would only be a quarter of it, 25% of somebody's job here,
Right.
that can be 100% of their job there. And that's
great.
huge.
Yeah. And also, to your point, that same person may be a shared service across multiple clients, where you wouldn't hire a full-time UX person,
right?
But you can use a quarter of that UX person's time, and the other 3 quarters are devoted to somebody else that needs UX for a quarter of their time, something.
Yep. That's exactly right.
So speaking of different disciplines, I'm curious if there are certain disciplines of marketing that you really feel need to be owned within your core team, and are there certain other disciplines that you really would prefer to always get outside expertise or perspective?
So I think from what we like to own, and this is another thing I would tell any college student or high school student even, make sure you know how to write, because writing is something that we are going to keep in-house. And even if we hire an agency to do initial writing, we do the final editing always, especially in the investment business, where not only do you have to write it, you have to send it through compliance, who then tells you how anything you need to rewrite. Right. And that just takes somebody who can write. And so writing is actually the critical skill. I mean, even with, I'm going to use an overused term, Chat GPT, you have to know how to write those prompts.
Yeah.
And so if you're not a good writer, you're not going to be able to, number one, explain to the client about the product, nor are you going to be able to explain to me what your plans are for that product. And so writing has become the indispensable talent that you have to have.
I agree.
So,
and I agree 100%. And you're right that there is a new role that's been emerging, which is going to be like AI prompt engineer, which is
absolutely.
You still have to write well to be able to get the output that you're trying to get. And also, you and I probably, when we were back in our days in college, the English majors were chided by their parents mostly about being unemployable, because poet is not a great career. But man, being good at writing being able to, convince people through writing is a powerful tool in the toolbox for any marketer. And I love
Big
that.
time.
I love that
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, sometimes as marketers, we work with non-marketing functions within the organization that don't live and breathe marketing and don't always get it. I'm curious, how do you demonstrate the value of marketing to those non-marketing functions within the organization?
So several years ago, we used like these Google Sheets to create dashboards for us. And we have dashboards that are utilized that have focused on the executive level messaging. We have dashboards that only the marketers care about. And then we have dashboards for, say, what product would care about, what legal would care about. And so, and as we've grown, the big thing we're all talking about as marketers in any event that I go to is attribution. How do you prove the revenue, which is what the executive team cares about? Let's admit it. The CEO really doesn't care how many people came to the website. They like it. The more the merrier. But really what they want to know is that the people who came to the website actually gave us revenue. And so applying that revenue to a particular activity is becoming key. In fact, as I speak to salespeople who actually understand revenue way better than marketers do because they're in sales. And so I basically try to put a number on various initiatives or campaigns that we're doing in marketing to a revenue target. We're hoping that this leads to 25 million in sales or 25 million in revenue. And, even if we don't hit it, we're at least talking the language of executives and sales because they both speak that language, because at the end of the day, that's what they care about. And so these various dashboards, right now, we don't have them connected to revenue, but that's the goal. But I always then add the revenue part when I'm speaking with those different types of audiences. But that was the greatest thing we did. And in everything we do advertising wise, we put a link to it that links back to the dashboard so we could see how well it did. Everything from what size of digital banner post we ran, like on Yahoo, we take over mobile, or called mobile moments, where it takes over the whole screen, what that brought in, how long they stayed, where they went after that. All of these matter to help map the journey so that when they do provide revenue, we go, okay, that's where that came from. That's why TV, frankly, regular broadcast TV is going to struggle from that perspective. Not that I don't respect it. I use it. We do TV advertising, but it's really a brand. I see that in our brand studies as opposed to our dashboards, because really when I advertise, say on CNBC, I get them coming to cnbc.com, and that's how I can tell how well it did.
Well, that feeds the very top of the funnel, and then your dashboards help measure what happens in the middle to the bottom of the funnel.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So I'm curious, either at your current gig or at a previous gig, if there was a campaign or program that either was a miserable failure and taught you a valuable lesson that you needed that would really help you later in your career, or was a huge success that maybe you'd like to emulate again in the future.
So which one do you want to hear first?
Whichever.
I've done them both.
Let's do a flop and then a success.
Okay, great. The flop was I did work in oil and gas with my brother, and he's really a smart dude. He's an engineer. He's an engineer type. I'm a more creative type. So that made for its own interesting conflicts with between two brothers. But we had a deal with a farmer in Texas who leased his land. We went and drilled, and I was here in Chicago. The land was in Texas. The rest of the team was in Texas. I stayed here in Chicago, but I was on the phone, and we hit oil like you wouldn't believe. We hit like, the movie Giant with, I think it's Gregory Peck or well, anyway, we're just spurting out of the ground and we're just whooping and hollering. And then the geologist goes, the pressure that's coming from there is too great. We did not lay pipe thick enough to handle this pressure. And so everybody's like, yeah, that's a bummer. We're going to need to cap it, and then we'll drill and find it. It's so much pressure. Find it again. We never found it again. Ever found it again. So what that says to me is never plan for the worst and the minimum scenario. Had he planned for pressure and a great outcome, we would have been sitting pretty. But the fact that we never found it again, when you find something, you have to take advantage of it now. And so I've applied that to many different things. But in that time, it was a miserable failure. And it was just a bummer. On the flip side,
hey, David, would you say that in that situation, the pressure was just too great?
The pressure was too great. It was too great. But you have to be prepared for that pressure. And so we just didn't prepare as an organization. But that's a good one. Yeah, the pressure was too great.
All right. So let's hear about the success.
The success comes from a campaign we have going now. It's called Wallet Share. It actually was driven by our sales team, who came to us and said, hey, we have an idea. And because our marketers we always listen to our sales team, it was like, and it was around figuring out how advisors can convince current clients to give them more of their wallet. It's a huge dilemma across the industry, and it's the easiest way to grow your revenue as an advisor is to take a current client, rather than doing cold calling, rather than looking for referrals, take a current client. Well, in the industry, we've never talked about what the personality of your client is. We've always said, well, you got to supply this, you've got to do this, and if you don't lower your fees. No, it has nothing to do with that. There's basically 5 personality types of clients, and you need to look and see and speak in the language of those 5 personality types, and that will help you. And we did a huge national survey of both advisors and of wealthy individuals to see how they wanted to be talked to, and none of them want to be asked, "Can you give me a referral?" None of them. However, they will get you referrals if you talk to them a certain way about growing their wallet share. And so, it's been a fantastic ride. It's brought in leads, it's brought in revenue that we've been able to tie to revenue. It has been one of those projects where it hit the exactly what we needed, and it's helped drive business for us. So it pays to listen to your sales team, because they are in the field. And what they heard over and over was advisor telling me, if you could just tell me how to grow wallet share with my current clients, that would be really cool.
Awesome.
Hey, so yeah.
That sounds great. All right. So I'm going to shift gears and ask just a couple of questions for fun. The first one is, I'm curious if there's a sports team or a quote or a book or a movie or a band that really inspires you. And what is it about that thing that inspires you most?
Well, a couple of things. I am a huge fan of Ralph Waldo Emerson, and his quote, "The years teach much that the days never knew." And it always helps me keep in perspective in any given day. Not, again, something could be great, but something could also be down here, and you just have to look at it over the thread of years. And when you're in your 20s and 30s, it's tougher to do that. As I've gotten more mature, not older, more mature, I have learned that over the years, and seeing the cycles and how life progresses is really valuable to keep in mind. My favorite book of all time is called Boys in the Boat, which talks about this rowing team out of the University of Washington during the Depression, and how they worked together to become a team. And they were from all over the United States, and go on to win the NCAAs, and this was back a while ago. And I'll tell you, the movie I'd recommend is Air, about Nike and Michael Jordan. It is not a sports movie. It's not a sports movie. If you've seen it, It's not a sports movie. It is a business movie, and it is a
Wow.
marketing movie, and
Awesome.
I loved it.
Well, I grew up in North Carolina where college basketball is king,
Yeah,
and Michael
yeah,
Jordan is the king of the kings
yeah.
in North
Yes, he
Carolina.
is. Yeah.
Okay, I love it. So I'm curious, outside of your family, where do you find joy? Do you have any hobbies or passions outside of work?
Yeah, I like to bike and do a fair amount of biking. I also like to write. I write for Fast Company and entrepreneur.com and even for Newsweek. And so that keeps me fairly busy. And really, I like to do my own grass and do my own landscaping. I like to get my fingernails dirty because so often I'm just sitting here over a computer. And so my weekends will be out in my yard, not mowing's easy, but it's the landscaping part. It's the designing something that can come be created in right before your eyes. And in marketing, oftentimes it takes so long to finally get the campaign up and going. And in landscaping, you can pretty much accomplish something in an afternoon. And so
Wow.
there's definite thrill in getting that.
It's the tangible side of,
Yeah, it
versus
is.
the ethereal or,
Yeah.
yeah. So the last question is, I'm curious if there's a brand that you have never worked on that you really admire, and what is it about that brand that you admire most?
So this summer we had a wedding in Atlanta. So we went to the Coke Museum.
Yep, the
And
world of Coca-Cola here.
yeah,
I'm in
yeah.
Atlanta. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it was really cool. Growing up as a kid, you didn't say, do you want a soda? I grew up in Arizona, by the way. You didn't say you wanted a soda or a pop. You said, do you want a Coke? Oh, what do you want? Oh, I'll take a root beer. That was the generic Coke was the drink, but you'll take a root beer or an orange crush or whatever as a kid. But so it's just made me appreciate how dominant Coke became and synonymous with a drink. And kind of there are brands in our industry that I really admire. BlackRock with iShares being one of those, that they do a phenomenal job making it almost synonymous with exchange traded funds. And so I really appreciate them. The one that I use almost daily though, and this is so cliche, but I'm going to say it, it's Amazon. I use it freaking almost, or my wife or I use it they're in the house. But the way they've grown and how Jeff Bezos built clocks around the world that only chime on like 1,000 year or 10,000 year. It's like, it's crazy the long-term perspective he's able to have in a very short-term world. So
Yeah.
that would be
Well,
one too.
that's a great one too.
Yeah.
I love both of those. And, I think as marketers, brands are fascinating and the differences in brands. And so I appreciate those examples. Well, I have to say, David, David Partain is the Chief Marketing Officer for Flexshares, which is a division of Northern Trust. Right. So David, this has been such a joy to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you. It's been great to be on. I really appreciate it.